if there was one person who just had, it was like, Paul, you need to know what the truth is about this issue. And I'm gonna give you a random issue. It's gonna be very complex. And you can pick one person to spend 1 week doing the research, and you don't know what the issue is. Who would you pick? I'd pick Destiny. It's like, if Destiny looks into something for a week straight, 12 hours a day, doing his Wikipedia warrior stuff, and also doing, you know, underneath the Wikipedia sources and watching the interviews and all that, I'm very confident in Destiny's ability to get to the truth. I'm not very confident in how he presents it, because I think he's partisan and he has other issues, which will come out in the Destiny Champion Spotlight eventually. But that's why I'm like, I believe that there are people out there who, if you are just focused on the truth, you will get to a point where you can then articulate that as well as Destiny does, which is why I basically don't think there should be any topic that is discouraged or off limit in terms of debate. Do you or sympathize with that? Or
I sympathize with it, but I also, from listening to Destiny's content, like I said on the episode that we did, there is a presentation Destiny gives where he's like, you know, it's good to have people challenge Nick Fuentes on his ideas and to introduce his audience to, you know, like in Destiny's case, like center-left perspectives and pushback. And I definitely do think there is value towards people engaging with, like, and in this case, you know, Nick Fuentes, I think every reasonable person would recognize as like extremist, right? Like a neo-Nazi kind of figure, right?
Yes, so, with the qualification that I do hold out hope that if, I believe the bridge is burned, to use a Destiny cult terminology, but I believe Nick Fuentes, with enough of the right incentives and with more conversations with people like Destiny, could theoretically, and could disabuse himself of the most extreme stuff. And the reason I say that is because I've seen people on I've seen people on the far right attack Nick for being whatever to establishment or whatever, which is like, yeah, insane to the average person. But my thing is, I always look for internal divisions on the most extreme sides, because that reveals some fundamental important difference. I don't know exactly what they're talking about, but otherwise, yes, Nick Fuentes.
So shitty. I can see plenty of like cases where even like an extremist being confronted and debated and, you know, like platformed, so to speak, has produced beneficial outcomes of discrediting people like Nick Griffin in the UK, the BNP leader, going on, I think it was Question Time on Newsnight or something. He went on a political debate show, and he got kind of humiliated, right? Like in that, so it didn't increase the BNP's like relevance. It actually essentially destroyed them, right? And
yes, the truth is a good disinfectant to cockroach ideas,
right? But there are, you know, there's always counterexamples and whatnot. But like, so I'm just saying, in principle, I'm not saying never do that. I'm not saying debates that Destiny has had with like a whole bunch of extreme figures are useless. Like, I agree with his rationalization that there is value to responding to those ideas and presenting alternatives to their audience. But I do also think that there is a lot of it, which is like debate pornography. Like, yes. It isn't. It's like when I see Destiny on Fresh and Fit with Andrew Tate and with like Nick Fuentes or whatever,
yeah,
like there's basically nothing. Nobody is there like saying, "Oh, hey, you know, like I got to change." It's just they're there to see people say extreme things and rant at each other and get annoyed. And Destiny is there because he enjoys doing that. Like that's what he was built to do, yes. Right? In some respect. So I think that it is false if he presents that as being about, you know, the high-minded, let's engage and present. It's more like, no, he likes to roll around in the muck on occasion. And that stuff I don't see as that beneficial to.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to that perspective. I do think you can make the case that you have to go where the people who need the message most are, especially when you're talking about extremism, because extremists by definition pretty much are in their echo chambers, right? So there is an element of you have to kind of go where they are. But I do think, but it's like it's like being an undercover cop. Like an undercover cop has to lie and manipulate people, basically like a psychopath. Like an undercover cop is essentially a psychopath for good, right? Like earning the trust of someone in a deep, deep way to only backstab them, right? And so it's like, overall, undercover cop, good. But the price that that undercover cop pays psychologically or with his life is like, the reason he's good is because he's making such a significant sacrifice for a greater cause, so to speak.
Sure.
Now, I'm not suggesting that Destiny is sacrificing for, yeah. But I do think his personality, in terms of the debate pervert, I believe is the meme way of phrasing it. I think that personality is best suited to go into the echo chambers and make some difference. Is it always optimal? No. Is it even mostly optimal? Maybe not. But I generally am sympathetic to the perspective you have to go where the people who need the message most are.
So that is why I think, to some extent, when people are criticizing Destiny for like engagement, there are invalid presentations of that, which is like, he's really, he loves hanging around with Nick Fuentes, and he's
chicken and waffles.
He's a secret Nazi or whatever. But like, I watched the Nick Fuentes a couple of episodes, and like, by the nature of having someone at your house and, like hanging around, they do come off as like, a bit more, oh, well, you're a neo-Nazi, I'm a center-left person, but isn't it nice that we can get on? I'm kind of
I'm kind of in favor of that, because that's what Daryl Davis does with the KKK members.
Yeah, but you can't always just cite Daryl Davis, because like,
I agree.
He comes up a lot. And
yes, one should not compare themselves to the closest thing to a living saint, which I think Daryl Davis is the closest thing to a living saint in many ways. But
I've also heard, now this might speak about the various online chambers that I've inhabited, but I remember hearing something about Daryl Davis providing character witness to like neo-Nazi people, right, who were on trial, and them using that, but essentially they were not reformed. Like they were, in private chats or whatever, they were speaking openly about using him to like launder the reputation. So yeah, I'm not saying that undermines everything that he attempts to do. I'm just saying that I still think there is like, there's a good reason to discriminate against neo-Nazi and fascist ideologies, and even like Jordan Peterson.
Hot take. Yes, no, I share that perspective. Yeah,
even like theoretically, all the right-wing people also agree with me, right? Because they are saying that, like, fascists, we shouldn't be like normalizing them and saying this is reasonable behavior. So like, where you draw the line for those, but like, I just think I'm not even saying like you have to. I think that, like, liberal societies have to deal with the fact that there can be like pro-fascist in it, and that's part of the like freedom of speech. But you don't have to treat them as if they're perfectly normal. It's just a different political like point of view. Like, no, they're like bigots.
I agree.
Promoting a hateful ideology.
I agree. I think God Sod, who I believe you've done an episode on, pointed out in his
master.
Yeah, well, he pointed out Go ahead.
You should do an episode on him.
On God Sod? Like, Champion Spotlight? Yeah, he might be in the backlog. He made a point in his book, which I will remember forever, of like, some ideas deserve to be mocked. Like, if someone says we should legalize murder, like, okay, as soon as you start eating, like, well, let's talk about it. Like, what are they? It's like, no.
Yeah. You
need to use, and that's, I'm a big, again, legally, this is a comedy channel. So I often will just write people off as, well, this is just dumb, and you're just pathetic or cringy or whatever. Or I say worse stuff. And you have to be able to do that. I would say it's a pragmatic thing of like, okay, like Nick Fuentes, that was my attitude a few years ago. I see Nick Fuentes on relatively, I don't know, you call him mainstream, but I see Nick Fuentes on more mainstream media than he was relegated to a few years ago. And I would say, from a pragmatic perspective, that means that you now, I think, have to take the more Destiny, let's talk to him as a person perspective than the, well, he's an idiot and he should be mocked. Because it's like, I've heard Nick Fuentes talk. And first off, I've laughed out loud at Nick Fuentes' jokes. That's just a fact. And Nick Fuentes, because the worst part about Nick Fuentes is the same worst part about most sophists, is he talks about like some real things. You know, it's like, okay, well, when he talks like anti-white racism and shit, it's like, well, guess what? That's real if you accept that white people are discriminated against in the form of DEI quotas that require people to hire a certain number of people who are not white. It's like, and I left my last company because of that. And so it's like, to then just say, oh, he's an idiot.
But he is.
Well, but no, I wouldn't say he's an idiot. I think that's underestimating the threat that he poses.
No,
he's a sophist for sure. And he's dishonest, and I don't watch so much of Nick Fuentes, to be honest. So but like,
in hearing him discuss things with Destiny, his worldview is like poorly thought out and
exactly
like logically incoherent. And
yes.
So when I say stupid, I don't mean like he's not like he can't string sentences together. He obviously can, and you know he can. Sure. He can do enough to generate like a following and all that kind of thing. But his like political worldview and stuff, like it's childish and bigoted, and like
which is why I loved the fact that Destiny brought him into his apartment. No, there's no audience; they're just talking to them. And the only reason I bring this up now is because I literally just watched that whole debate or the whole conversation Destiny and Nick had, because I'm going to clip some of it for the video on Destiny I'm doing, and I was like, because he's talking about like 9/11 and how he like, here's why I do not believe George Bush was involved, and here's all these reasons. And because he did it in sort of a steelman-y way of like, okay, clearly the government has engaged in insane shit like Operation Northwoods or whatever. Okay, fine. So I'm sympathetic from that perspective. But here's all the technical reasons why, in order for George Bush to have been involved in September of 2001, was 9/11 2000 or 2001?
2001.
Okay, I was not old enough. I was not old enough to remember.
I said that very confidently. But,
I know that's why I asked.
I'm pretty sure it was 2000 and September 11, 2001. Yeah, okay, I was right to be confident.
Yeah, fair. But the point is, Destiny says, like, so many agencies would have to be involved because it's a cross-agency type thing. Whereas other conspiracies that could be isolated to one agency, that makes more sense. Like, for example, he cites like the invasion of Iraq and how that was kind of manipulated. So, okay, great. So, because Nick Fuentes' worldview is so childish and foolish, it is so obviously taken apart, and Destiny's good at that, I think. But you have to kind of be empathetic to like not be like, you're an idiot right off the bat,
Right. You have to like package things in a certain way. But, like you said, he's a sophist, right? So like engaging with him if you're not Destiny
is dangerous. Yes, I would not talk to Nick Fuentes. I would say, you got to go talk to Destiny first.
And so, like, again, it comes down to, what you're doing, how well prepared you are, and those kind of things. Like, I think there is reasons to be like engaging with people, extremists, or their content, as long as you know what you're doing. And I think that it's like one point that you brought up there, Paul, was like Nick Fuentes is increasingly featuring on more mainstream thing than he was, not on the left, right, on the right. But that is isn't that sort of indicative of a particular issue, that the right is becoming more tolerant of more extreme ideas? Like,
that's a problem.
Jones is now a lot more mainstream than he was, 10 years ago or 6 years ago. And Tucker Carlson is a lot more crazy now than he was when it seems that Fox were actually constraining him in some respect from.
So two things. First off, you and I have fundamentally different views on this. The smaller thing is the left does that too. Hassan Piker is platforming the Houthi pirates. Like,
no. So, but look, Hassan is on Piers Morgan. That's not, Piers Morgan is a conservative like editor, and so I'm not saying left-wing media doesn't put on like crazy people, but I'm saying the much bigger problem about the like moving of the Overton window to me seems to be that the fringe right is now like significantly dominant. And I mean, like, you can see it in the US context, because Biden is the Democratic president, and Trump is the Republican candidate, right? Like there's a difference in the characters of those two people.
Yeah, one of them is a narcissist. The other doesn't have a character, and he's just propped him on amphetamines. That's where I don't want to go into the Trump Biden stuff. I will say, again, I think it's a matter of perception. Do you know JJ McCullough by any chance? He's a Canadian YouTuber. I talk to him every now and then.
Oh, I think I just saw his name in one of your titles.
Yeah. I have the same problem with you as I do JJ McCullough, which is just we're looking at a different set of facts. Because when you say the right is more susceptible to its fringe than the left is, that's just like a fundamentally, we're just looking at, we'd have to hash that out in a whole bunch of ways. At minimum, it's a significant problem on the right. I agree.
Yeah, that's all. I think it's perfectly fine to debate like what is happening in left-wing media, and particularly in those conversations, it's almost always people are talking about left-wing media in America. I have no idea because I've never watched MSNBC or in my life.
Well, you're better off for it.
But the other thing is like, all I want to say is whenever people are talking about this kind of thing, it's always kind of presented without the context that there is this really big right-wing media ecosystem, which stretches from InfoWars and Nick Fuentes into, Fox News and The Spectator and so on. And I think if you want to talk about media, you can't just exercise out the 50%, which is like right-leaning.
Yeah, but even again, this goes back to the very, very beginning, which is I don't think the right and left dichotomy is even that useful because is the Daily Wire part of the right-wing media network?
Yeah.
Okay, but they're at direct odds with Nick Fuentes when it comes to Israel. So that's a fundamental disagreement.
Right. But like Hassan Piker doesn't whatever, center left person. So there's always divisions within it. But all I'm saying is
that's a fundamental division to the point where I'm just pointing that out in terms of Nick Fuentes and Jeremy Boring had a debate or they had an exchange at least on Twitter. Jeremy Boring being the CEO of Daily Wire.
Didn't Boring say that he really respected his hustle?
It was the opposite of what we were just talking about in terms of you should just marginalize. Again, I think the fact that Nick Fuentes is as popular as he is, which again, he's not mainstream certainly, but he's getting more mainstream. This was the other fundamental disagreement I was going to have in just our worldviews is I'd say generally speaking, meaning there are exceptions to this, but generally speaking, the rise of extremists on one side or the other is a function of them latching on to true grievances or talking points. So the point I brought up about anti-white racism or whatever. It's that's real. That's not, I don't view that as controversial. Well, I won't make a statement on anti-white racism. But it's so obvious and in your face in my sphere, and certainly in my real life too, to the point where, like I said, I left my last job because they weren't calling me, a cracker down the halls, but it was certainly affecting my ability to get promoted and whatnot. And they said basically as much. So the more that rises up, well, then what happens? Well, regular people who don't even know who Nick Fuentes is, they just see a clip and they go, oh, this guy's right. Oh, this guy's making a valid point. And then they see you and I say, well, Nick Fuentes is just such an idiot, nothing he says is true. It's we don't say nothing he says isn't true. But that's my point of we need to make sure that we acknowledge the good points from any extremist. I think the best way that you push back against extremism is to start with, here are all the reasons why I agree with whatever talking points you lead with. And that's fair enough. This is our fundamental dispute.
This is where we do disagree, because I would say that it's perfect. There's no issue to highlight when somebody is making a valid point, whatever it might be. Alex Jones can get things right. Brett Weinstein can get things right. The Hassan Piker, whichever your political boogeyman is, they can get things right. But the one issue is when you stack it up front with, look, here's all the things that you get right. 1, 2, 3, 4. It inherently gives the view that so you're starting off with that you've got reasonable issues, right? And it's just that you veer off on like where you go from there. Like your conclusions are a little bit off, but like that's not really it, right? When you're proposing,
that's not how I'd phrase it. Just to be clear, I wouldn't just go, your conclusions are a little off about all the Jews and all that. You know, it's
right.
Like,
but that's the thing. It's an what you want is an ethno-nationalist like theocracy, right? That's an extreme thing. Yes. But so I know this is so. What I mean is like the reason we want to like disagree is not that those foundations which are easy to like agree on. It's because of the insane stuff and the like extreme stuff. And that's the point of disagreement. So I agree that it looks bad whenever people are too eager to kind of like, they look like they're dismissing things out of hand. I don't think you should do that rhetorically, but I also think there is an issue whenever you see someone and they spend, you know, like 20 minutes talking about how the person is like, you know, they've got an interesting perspective and they've got all these things. And then when they get to the disagreement, it's always, you know, very softly presented or like kind of the pushback.
Fair enough. Maybe the fundamental difference is then who is the audience that we're targeting? Because like, for example, I am much more open to if someone says, you know, I'm kind of like, you know, I'm kind of buying this QAnon stuff. I go, psh, brother, with P. Diddy and Jeffrey, you know who, of course I'm sympathetic to that. Now, again, it's like, well, they're eating babies and like, or Jordan Peterson is part of the cult too. Like, you know, you can always get the most extreme views about whatever. My first inclination is to, again, maybe I would say it's to validate of the valid points they have. Now I get your point, because you can be like, you can sanitize. That was sort of the fundamental disagreement between Destiny and one of his orbiters who shall not be named.
But in that case, like I think this, you know, to take it back to Jordan Peterson and Destiny, there you have two high-profile people. You have them engaging, and like this is why I much prefer Destiny's discussion with Jordan Peterson versus Sam Harris's, right? And this is slightly Jordan Peterson's fault as well, because Sam Harris raised a couple of points that would normally have triggered Jordan Peterson, but for some reason he let it go, or he kind of moved the conversation on. So when they discussed, you would have thought that like Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, you know, they disagree on some stuff about like symbolism of religion and how important it is and whatnot. But like fundamentally, you know, they both recognize each other as important, like philosophical or whatever, like, you know, public intellectuals. But the Destiny discussion with Jordan Peterson was much clearer about what Jordan Peterson's positions are that cause him to be controversial, right? And also were clear about Destiny's like counter positions. So I was like, this is good. This is better than the 2-hour conversation Sam and Jordan had, where they didn't really highlight why people would think that they would strongly disagree. And so I'm in favor of like that kind of thing where you have a discussion, and like Destiny was well prepared, right? Like he didn't know all the topics that were going to be covered, but he knows how to debate climate change, and he knows about how to debate vaccine stuff. So it was effective, but it also meant, like, I think for Jordan's fans, they are like, yes, Jordan is saying, you know, I've seen lots of people that were like, he said it like, you know, it should be and whatnot. And like, it's good that he mentioned the WEF and stuff. And like, I'm also thinking it is good that he mentioned that, because people should know that's what he's saying, right? Like, it's not the Jungian psychology that causes the big controversy. It's all this stuff. And you can talk to Jordan Peterson and completely avoid all that stuff if you want.